The viral horror movie clips you scroll through online. Most of them are just random coincidences. The true mystery of horror movies is not the monsters or killers, but the psychology of the viewer. Today, I would like to solemnly introduce another horror movie. R-rated, full-scale horror movie. Midnight Horror 6, Nightfall. As always, it's made up of 3 stories. This first one is a story that takes place in the convenience store. The main character, Soo-hyun, a college student looking for work, is a genuine hard worker. To save money for flight attendant training, she gritted her teeth and took a night shift cashier job. They say in Korea, most people who venture out to buy things in the middle of the night aren't exactly normal. One night, the masked man, a suspicious customer who comes in late, showed up, and his appearance was extremely eerie. This guy spent ages rummaging through the shelves, only to grab a tiny trinket, then turned to Soo-hyun to ask for change. Soo-hyun nodded and reached out to get the change, but her movements were incredibly slow, as she deliberately pulled out coins and placed them one by one into the weirdo's hand. That's when she noticed the weirdo's hand was incredibly strange, dark and covered in long hair, almost like a wolf's claw. The weirdo, naturally, started to get impatient. He growled, "Can't you hurry it up?" However, Soo-hyun was only doing what the store owner had instructed. Seeing how aggressive the weirdo was, Soo-hyun's heart rate instantly shot up to 180 beats per minute. She quickly pressed the alarm button hidden under the counter. The weirdo reached out and grabbed her arm, leaving a bloody scratch. Then, he ripped off his mask, revealing the face of the werewolf, all caught clearly by the surveillance camera behind him. By the time the police officers arrived, the werewolf had long vanished. The police officers asked if she had seen any bad guys. They thought Soo-hyun was hallucinating, and just brushed it off and left. Soo-hyun hadn't quite come to her senses yet when the convenience store owner obsessed with physiognomy, arrived. She was a fashionable woman who looked like she'd had some work done. As soon as she walked in, she asked if Soo-hyun had clearly seen the monster's face. Soo-hyun paused, surprised. "How did you know?" The store owner smiled, leading Soo-hyun into the convenience store's warehouse. Inside the warehouse, there was a secret room. The walls of the secret room were covered with all sorts of human face photos and many books on physiognomy. Only then did Soo-hyun realize that running the convenience store was just a front. The store owner's real passion was studying physiognomy. The store owner said that a convenience store, being a place with constant foot traffic, was the perfect spot to observe all sorts of faces. The store owner pointed to a screenshot from the surveillance footage and said, "Look at her forehead. It's protruding like a small mountain, with a brow bone so high it could kill someone. And that Korean nose? These are all classic features of a serial killer. These people are nocturnal beasts, lurking in the night, specifically looking for easy targets." Soo-hyun, the night shift cashier, finally realized she had just had a brush with death. The store owner continued, "I told you to take your time with the change, precisely to force her to remove her mask and reveal her face. If you hadn't hit the alarm, things could have gone sideways today." Soo-hyun was so terrified that tears welled up in her eyes, thinking, "Nope, I definitely can't do this job anymore." But then, the store owner puffed out her chest and declared, "From today onwards, your salary will be increased by 5 times. You're staying here and continuing to work for me. Don't you want to be a flight attendant? Your current face won't cut it. I'll help you fix it when the time comes." Soo-hyun looked at the mysterious boxes in the warehouse, realizing the store owner must have collected many physiognomy charts. The next night, more weirdness ensued. The sloppy man, a scruffy individual, stood in front of the counter, demanding Soo-hyun give him some expired food for free. Soo-hyun shook her head. "I'm sorry, but near expiry items are half price. We can't give them away for free." Hearing this, the man immediately got upset and started arguing with Soo-hyun. Just then, he noticed a wooden box nearby. It smelled like roasted human flesh. What the heck was inside? Soo-hyun tried to stop him, But the man smashed the box with one punch. He grabbed the box and tilted it, and out rolled a bloody human head. Both of them froze, unable to breathe. Just then, the convenience store lights suddenly flickered and went out. In the darkness, the store owner suddenly appeared. She slowly walked up to the man and gave him a physiognomy judgment. Your face clearly shows you're a glutton. And just like that, the man's head was separated from his body. Soo-hyun was scared out of her wits and rushed to the door, trying to escape. But the door was already locked. The store owner closed in on her. Because your lovely face attracts all sorts of strange people, which allows me to collect their physiognomies. Don't you want to be a flight attendant? Let me help you with that. With that, she raised a knife and lunged at Soo-hyun's face. Soo-hyun quickly pulled out her stun gun and zapped her. The store owner let out a shriek. Soo-hyun quickly hid in the warehouse. But it was too cold inside, and she quickly passed out. When she woke up the next day, the store owner was already standing in front of her. She had 4 eyes on her face, which was absolutely terrifying. It seemed the store owner's obsession with face reconstruction had completely consumed her. If Soo-hyun wanted to be a flight attendant, the store owner would have to reconstruct her face too. Soo-hyun had no choice but to let the store owner have her way. She didn't know she'd be turned into a beautiful woman or a monster. Alright, that concludes the first story. Let's move on to the second story, Order. This story is even more chilling than the one at the convenience store, because it happens right in our own backyard. May, a capable young woman, is our protagonist who opened her own small restaurant, closing at 10 p.m. After all, it's not safe for a young woman to be out late at night. One night, it was past 9 p.m. Only one male customer remained in the restaurant, and he just wouldn't leave. May walked over and politely said, "Sir, we're closed now." But as soon as she finished speaking, the man abruptly stood up. May was startled, instinctively grabbing the chopsticks nearby to defend herself, fearing she'd run into trouble. But the man didn't do anything. He just stared intently at May, with a creepy smile spread across his face. Then he pulled out some money, threw it on the table, turned, and left. May finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, this was just the beginning. It was as if this man had fixated on May. He came every single day, sometimes not even ordering anything, just standing outside the restaurant window, watching. It made May's skin crawl. She wanted to call the police several times, but she had no evidence. Fortunately, after a few days, the male customers stopped coming. May was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when someone else started ordering takeout every night at 10:30 p.m., right at her closing time. The main thing was that every time this person ordered takeout, they left a bad review. Either the food was too salty or it was cold. They were basically nitpicking everything. One night, after the last wave of customers left, May, dragging her tired body, was cleaning up the dishes, thinking she could finally go home. But, as she turned around, May's hair stood on end. In the corner of the restaurant, a woman had appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. The woman had disheveled hair, was dressed all in black, and had her back to May. She was muttering something in an incomprehensible way. Her voice was thin and sharp, like a mosquito. Suddenly, the woman spun around, opened her mouth wide, and let out a blood-curdling scream. May's legs went weak with fright. She almost collapsed onto the floor. But when she opened her eyes again, there was nothing in the corner. May, feeling wronged, called her best friend. She also mentioned that the bad reviewer lived right next door to her. May had even seen her once before. She was a woman around her own age. The best friend got furious when she heard this. Isn't this just bullying? The next time she orders takeout, you should just dump some trash in it, use spoiled ingredients, or even add some extra protein. May thought this idea was pretty satisfying, so she agreed. Not even 2 days later, the bad reviewer ordered takeout again. May gritted her teeth and actually made her a dish with slightly spoiled vegetables, even adding extra salt on purpose. But after the takeout was delivered, the person surprisingly didn't leave a bad review or any response at all. However, soon after, the best friend called. The news reported that a woman had fallen unconscious after eating a late-night snack yesterday evening, and by the time she was found, she had already been dead for several days. And this woman lived in the same complex as May, who grew increasingly scared the more she thought about it. What if the customer died from eating her food? She'd be in serious trouble. To be safe, she decided to go check if the person was actually dead or not. May bravely went to knock on the neighbor's door. But before her hand even touched the door, it creaked open by itself. May screamed in terror, then woke up. Turns out, it was all a dream. But not long after, the police officers came knocking. The police officers said a female corpse had been found next door to May, and the time of death was over 1 week ago. May was flabbergasted. A week? Then who was ordering takeout and leaving bad reviews every single day for the past week? The police officers showed May a photo and asked her to confirm if this was the woman who ordered the takeout. May took one look at the photo and was certain it was her. May was taken in for one morning of questioning. This is when May finally understood everything. The woman had been dead for a week. The serial killer was using the dead neighbor's phone to order takeout for May every single day. The serial killer did this to provoke May, making her drop her guard so he could strike when she came to confront him. May was trembling all over. Walking down the hallway, she saw illusions everywhere, as if the serial killer was about to jump out and murder her. She finally made it home, filled with dread. Just then, her phone rang again, with a takeout app notification. May tremblingly opened her phone and almost passed out from shock. It was an order placed from her own account, with her home address as the delivery location. May screamed and threw her phone to the ground. Just then, the lights suddenly went out. Footsteps and a man's laughter echoed in the darkness. May used the phone screen's light to see that the man was none other than the serial killer who had harmed her neighbor. He had first staked out her restaurant daily, then used the dead neighbor's phone to order takeout and leave bad reviews, luring the seller to her door and then brutally murdering her. In short, basically he was just a total sicko. That concludes the second story. Now, let's move on to the final story, which is the most suspenseful and desperate one. The Night Stalker. The main character, Suin, a former Special Forces soldier who was incredibly skilled, retired and found a job at a security company, responsible for patrolling several companies. One day, while she was on patrol, they suddenly received a call from the security company, informing her that there was a pervert in the company's basement. Suin didn't hesitate and went there alone. Checking the basement. The doors were securely locked, and there was nothing out of place. So she figured it was a system error. However, something strange was already watching her. Suin spun around, but saw nothing. She entered the equipment room to continue her search. In the darkness, she had already ventured deep into the danger zone. Two of the masked colleagues were waiting for her in the shadows. Suin vaguely sensed something was wrong, so she called for help while quickening her pace, but there was no signal in the basement. The masked colleagues closed in, coming face to face with Suin. Being that they were armed, and to avoid being ambushed from both sides, Suin, a former Special Forces soldier, decided to make a run for it, despite her training. But it seemed like they knew the terrain even better than she did, and quickly cornered her again. With nowhere left to retreat, Suin had no choice but to pull out her stun baton and fight them. However, one of the masked colleagues parried her attack, then pulled off his mask and burst out laughing. It was then that Suin realized she had been played, and she was so furious she almost threw her stun baton at them. Her colleagues explained that a former Special Forces security guard had mysteriously disappeared last year during a mission. Some said he accidentally wandered into the backrooms and got trapped, unable to escape. The security captain, however, waved his hand and dismissed it, claiming the guy had faked his disappearance to collect insurance money. Then, the security captain handed Soo-in a small device, explaining that it was like a dashcam that could be activated in dangerous situations to transmit live video, allowing them to know her status immediately. Soo-in nodded and tucked the device into her pocket, unaware that as she turned to leave, the security captain looked at her sinisterly. After getting off work, Soo-in couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. What exactly were the backrooms? She opened her tablet and searched, only to find a bunch of bizarre news. The backrooms, a virtual space belonging to the security company's client, is composed of countless identical rooms, randomly generated with no exit, and filled with eerie monsters. Once you enter, you can never get out. Soo-in's hair stood on end as she read, praying she would never get trapped in there. But just then, the alarm rang again. It was Company O, where an alarm went off in the electrical room on the 5th basement floor. This place was quite close to Soo-in. Without even thinking, Soo-in grabbed her gear and went. When she arrived at Company O's entrance, the old security guard, who was the gatekeeper at Company and knew its secrets, was holding a file about a man named Xiao Hao, but saw a woman arrive instead. He curiously came out to stop her.
무슨 일이시죠?
경보가 울렸는데 모르셨나요?
오작동이겠죠. 여기 워낙 고양이가 많아서.
Soo-in wants to go inside and take a look. But the doorman of Company O muttered to himself, "This order is completely wrong. But if this woman wants to see so badly, let her go in. Whatever happens to her is none of my business." Soo-in cautiously ventured inside, but the door creaked shut and locked. Soo-in tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. She had no choice but to contact the security captain, the company's security chief who deliberately set traps for new employees, and ask him to rescue her immediately. Soo-in was now trapped in the backrooms, an infinite randomly generated virtual space with no exit. Her phone had no signal. She could only rely on her instincts to move forward. But this place was incredibly vast, with seemingly identical corridors and rooms, and after walking for a long time, she was still just going in circles. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed continuously, seemingly from the monsters, mysterious bloodthirsty creatures lurking in the backrooms. Soo-in quickly activated the recording device the security captain had given her, hoping to get rescued. But besides the sound of the monster's footsteps, there was nothing. Soo-in finally figured it out. Just now, the old security guard kept muttering that the order was wrong, meaning that new security guards like them were being tricked into this virtual space in the wrong sequence. That she would have been tricked into coming in sooner or later, destined to become a pawn to explore the monsters here, and ultimately, their next meal. Thinking of this, Soo-in was filled with despair. She could only leave a message for her mother and brother, knowing she could never go back. And that's where our third story wraps up. We had the face-reading maniac from the convenience store, the twisted serial killer from the restaurant, and the desperate struggle in the backrooms. Every single one of these stories just screams the darkness of human nature. Because honestly, monsters and demons, not nearly as terrifying as the human heart. Alright, that's it for Midnight 6 Night Down. We'll see you next time.